back to Ground Zero Salem. As always, I'm your host, Pat. So, on today's update, I'm going to be engaging in an activity that I haven't partaken in some time, which is a response video to a thread, a subject going around different YouTubers, different vinyl YouTubers, the vinyl community, if you will. It popped up on my feed. Vinyl Ritchie, channel I've been following and friends with for some time now, was responding to the subject of 5 records I'd never sell.
Never, ever, ever, never, 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 nen, nenverina, never, nev, Nuvenbon, Benverbery, Bury.
From my cold, dead hands.
Which is a good one. You know, I haven't heard that before. It looks like it's been doing the rounds with a couple of different YouTubers, vinyl YouTubers. Embryonic Robot, I believe, is one of them. I'll put links to all the ones I can find in the description below. But I thought this would be a cool subject that can be tackled from a myriad of different ways. I just watched Ritchie's video, which he's kind of bucking the sentimental component. That's the first thing that springs to mind when I hear that subject. His idea for records he'd never sell was just underrated bangers that are only a couple of bucks, so why would you sell them anyway? Which I think is a fun take on that. Mine are sentimental. Most of mine are gifts or trades or just from a certain period in my life, but these are 5 records I'll definitely never get rid of for different reasons. At the top of the pile is this 7-second 7-inch Skins, Brains, and Guts. I don't think it's the very first 7-second 7-inch. It might be. I know Blast from the Past is another one. They had a bunch of like raw or faster material before they came out with The Crew, and their records past that. This is when they were more of a straight up fast, aggressive kind of hardcore band. Not nearly as intense as early DRI, and there's more the melody. You can hear the embryonic melody that would kind of become more in the forefront later on, but it's definitely fast, go for the throat, early 80s hardcore stuff from Nevada. I traded this in the mid 2000s to a friend of mine, Charles, back in Syracuse. He was looking for, I think, more of the militant kind of straight edge stuff at the time, or maybe just local boys done good. So I traded him for an Earth Crisis 7-inch. The first one, All Out War, which was released on a local label, Conviction Records. It was a green vinyl variant. I traded that to him for this because I was more interested in the 80s hardcore stuff at the time. And it's kind of fluctuated. I've gotten very nostalgic for that 90s dive bomby kind of hardcore stuff. There's some newer bands that I certainly appreciate, like Eco Strike, that kind of sound that way. But I didn't really appreciate that hardcore until I was kind of out of it and revisiting it like in the 2000s later on. So at the time I traded this, which was either late 90s or like 2000 or 2001, I was all in on just classic 80s fast hardcore stuff, and this is a perfect record for that style. Just before they got super unity, everybody get along, it's more pissed. You know, We're Gonna Fight, classic number that I think they still do live, 7 seconds, is the last song on here. This Is My Life, Redneck Society, Racism Sucks, stuff like that. Just very outspoken, young hardcore from the early 80s. So, I should mention, also came out on Alternative Tentacles Records, which was, as we know, Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys label. Got the iconic bat there. All right, so another one, this was a gift from the guitarist in Chuck's band, Black Sheep Squadron. My friend Mike gave this to me. This is the only Life's Blood 7-inch, Defiance. They did another 7-inch that was a split with Sticks and Stones, but this is the only full 7-inch that they have. Since a couple years ago, all their stuff has been reissued on an LP and CD discography on Prank Records. This is a low-key historic New York hardcore 7-inch. It's fantastic. A lot of people quote it as their favorite for a good reason. It's certainly up there for me. It's very rebellious, going against the status quo of what was popular in their scene at the time. The first song is a scathing indictment against the youth of today, accusing them of being elitist and stuff like that. Musically, it's focused and straightforward, raw, hardcore punk, but it is I wouldn't say all over the map, but it's pretty varied in its approach. Songs like Catch Our Breath are a little bit more mid-paced and oi. Never Make a Change, that first song that kind of is anti-youth of today, is a little bit more like chugging and stomping, but they have a lot of like fast kind of stuff. You could tell they're still honoring the first half of the decade. This is from 1988, so there's a lot of stuff inspired by early 80s hardcore. I think they might have been looking to the UK and Europe a little bit, what was going over there when hardcore in the States took a little bit of a nosedive and went metal. Bands like Heresy overseas kind of picked up the pace with just playing raw, fast, kind of straightforward hardcore, maybe mixing in a little crust as they did so. And I feel like Life's Blood were probably aware of that. If you didn't know, Life's Blood went on to become Born Against, a bunch of the members, and the singer went on to become a cop. So that's just the way life goes. But this was put out by Combined Effort Records in Albany originally, and then it got reissued on Vermiform Records, which was Born Against label, in 1990. Got repressed a bunch of times. Eventually a very stripped down, bare bones discography slipcase CD came out in the mid-90s, and then proper reissue with remastering and all that on Prank Records a couple of years ago. I recommend getting your hands on that if you really want to experience this band. So my friend Mike gave this to me, and another friend of ours, Ryan, who is runs half of Deus Records. If you're familiar with Deus Records, they do a lot of neo-folk and martial industrial and field recordings and stuff like that. He was in New York. He lived in New York at the time, I believe. And I think he picked this up at Generation Records, and it was cheap. I mean, this is quite a while ago, probably like 15 years or so ago. But this was $5 in the bin at Generation. So he snagged it. He wasn't super into hardcore at the time, I want to say, and gave it to Mike, who gave it to me because Mike's not really into records. And I am. So I got this. It's a perfect record. That's a record I will never get rid of. Top 10 New York hardcore records easily. This one wasn't given to me by anybody, but it's from an important time in my life. I was living in Rochester, New York. First time I moved out of the house and had it stick. I moved out of my parents' house, I think my senior year of high school, and it just didn't, it didn't last. It was a punk house. I lived with a bunch of people in their mid-20s. I was like 18, trying to graduate high school, and by the end of the housewarming party, the entire place was like spray painted with graffiti, and by the time I moved out, there were people-sized holes in the walls. So that didn't really work. But a few months later, my parents pitched the idea to me, hey, you're done with high school. You don't know what you're doing with your life. Why don't you try going to community college and living with these family friends of ours that I'd known since I was a kid? They were basically like de facto aunt and uncle, not by blood, but otherwise family members. So I was like, all right, cool. I went and lived with them for a while. And I started hanging out, with all the punks in Rochester. And around that time, I was starting to get interested in metal again. I had a few years where I was very, very much absorbed into the early 80s hardcore stuff, hardcore punk, 77 punk, and the current day street punk scene that was blowing up at the time with like the Blanks 77 and the Casualties and stuff like that. And I was just starting to burn out on like simplistic 3-chord stuff. I was also really into some goth and some industrial. That was starting to fizzle for me a little bit. And I remembered, oh yeah, Crossover was sick, wasn't it? And I started tracking down these records. This is like 97, 98. Tracking down these records in record stores in Rochester. Rochester is low-key a super metal town, if you didn't know. Rochester, New York. It's where Kill 'Em All was recorded. The House of Guitars is a long-standing institution for musicians that are coming through there to buy stuff, gear and everything. They also have records. They used to have mountains of concert t-shirts that I'm sure would go for over $300 on eBay today, like all over the place. There's the record archive where I don't think he works there anymore, but Dan Loker worked there for a long time. He relocated there years and years ago. It's just overall like a really metal town. And this was a very not metal era, the late 90s. So picking up all these classics on LP was like pennies on the dollar. And I got some really good stuff, including some Nuclear Assault, I believe, some really great comps, like the Metal Blade Speed Metal comp and the Death Records comp. I got some Creator for like $5, and I got a bunch of records by The Accused, including this one. This is the debut LP from The Accused, The Return of Martha Splatterhead. This is the Combat Records pressing, Subcore / Combat Records pressing. This isn't my first encounter with this when I purchased this. I owned it on tape, I want to say earlier that year. And then when I got the opportunity to snag the vinyl, I did. Probably the first example of me multi-formatting it. I lost the cover to the tape and it was getting beat up. So I've had this since then. It's a very like important early score to me. I have a whole bunch of these arranged in my head of like early scores on vinyl before I started heavily collecting, when it was purely just, you know, owning it physically and just wanting it no matter what format it was on. CDs were the prevalent thing at the time. I probably would have preferred CDs, but LPs were so much cheaper. And I mean, what can you say about The Accused? I mean, it's perfect and anomalous band to me, because Crossover was this very interesting, I think organically occurring subgenre that came along in the mid 80s, but was also, I think, a little bit forced by the rock media at the time a bit. I mean, the obvious bands I'm sure you probably know if you're familiar with thrash metal: SOD, DRI, to a lesser extent Nuclear Assault. They're more of a straight ahead thrash band, but with a lot of crossover elements. Suicidal, of course, Excel, the whole Venice scene. But The Accused were something a little bit different. It feels like their brand, along with Cryptic Slaughter, it feels like their brand of crossover was just so natural, so naturally occurring, that they would be a bunch of punk kids, because their stuff before this, with their original singer before Blaine from the Farts joined, was straight up kind of generic, fast, pissed, political, hardcore. They're from Seattle. It was a lot of songs about war and things like that, and the government. And when Blaine joined with his like crazy kind of vomiting vocal style, and they started involving more of like, you can hear some Bay Area in there, Bay Area thrash kind of going on, but there's also lots and lots and lots of discharge. There's this very distinct, like fuzzy, fuzzed out bass sound. It's kind of just very much its own thing. It's a lot more frenetic and crazy. It's a little bit sloppier than a lot of other crossover at the time, but not like in a bad way. It just sounds like it's slightly falling apart at the seams, which gives it a lot of energy. And these crazed vocals. And there's songs about, you know, splattery stuff, horror stuff, Buried Alive, Autopsy, She's the Killer. A lot of stuff centering around this, you know, this mascot creature that they created, Martha Splatterhead. Not so much on this record, but the two albums past this, they kind of breached like social topics like War Equals Death 88 on Martha Splatterhead's Maddest Stories Ever Told. We Can All Live Together on the one after this, I want to say. There's a little bit of dark humor in this, like there's Fucking for Bucks about being a gigolo. It just seems to capture the sort of like comic book splatter that a lot of metalheads were into at the time, with a really punk attitude, and it's awesome. I was imagining that there was more social and political stuff on this record, but I was like, wait, isn't We Can All Live Together? Nope, that's on the one after this. War Equals Death, that's the one after that. Take My Time is also kind of like a hardcore song, you know, that sort of thing. And then this one, I mean, this is one of my favorite albums of all time. This is Corrosion of Conformity's Eye for an Eye. Again, kind of talking about the crossover stuff, although they hadn't really crossed over yet on this. Although you can hear a lot of Black Sabbath on it. They covered Green Manalishi. Doesn't look like it's on this. It might be not credited on this one. This is the Toxic Shock pressing. I have a couple of different versions of this. I have a copy of the cassette that I've had since, I want to say, 8th grade. This copy in particular is important to me because it belonged to a friend of mine who passed away about 10 years ago. And he was a record collector. He had a lot of stuff. He left his collection to a mutual friend who let me pick out what I wanted. So I grabbed this, and I grabbed an Anti-Nowhere League LP. But COC's Eye for an Eye beyond the sentimental value of who it belonged to before, is also one of my favorite records. It's tough because they have such a run all the way from this to Deliverance to me, where I love each of those records for different reasons. I like a lot of the stuff past that too, but I listen to this endlessly. And again, talk about, you know, not the most tight thing in the world. there's a lot of kind of messiness on this, but it's an amazing kind of controlled chaos, and just this, even that early on, you can hear the Sabbath influence in the 70s hard rock amidst all the raging, chaotic hardcore stuff. It's just an all-time banger for an LP. I picked up another copy of it recently on that shopping trip to Maine, proving that I guess I do have more than one copy of some LPs. I kind of forgot about that. But that was I think also Toxic Shock pressing, but it had the black cover with the kind of zombie skull with the COC dangly earring. And then finally, this was my dad's. He gave me a wine crate full of records 20 years ago or something. A lot of which I got rid of, which I am kind of regretting, you know, now, especially because my dad is passed. Now I'm kind of regretting that. My dad is no longer with us either. I actually kept the crate itself for a very long time. If you know the early videos that I did, there's a lot of me going through it was my new arrivals box, and it finally just kind of started to deteriorate, sadly. But I kept that record crate for a long time. Most of the records that came in it, I don't think I have anymore, which I'm kind of regretting, you know. There was a cool pressing of the White Album that was like a European pressing. At the time, I was like, I don't care about the Beatles, and not that I'm a Beatles super fan now, but I do like that record a lot. I kind of wish I still had it. Some stuff like that. There was an interesting like jazz fusion kind of prog record that I don't even remember what it was. I flipped that, but I still have this, and this is very bare bones Creedence best of. Creedence Gold. It's got these cool face things that flip back with all the members and everything. That's neat. There's only 4 songs on this. You got Proud Mary, Down on the Corner, Bad Moon Rising, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, The Midnight Special, Have You Ever Seen the Rain, Born on the Bayou, and Susie Q. So Not Even Fortunate Son is on this. I have a couple of other Creedence records. I think I have a Live at Woodstock record and another best of. One of those Mike Seatown gave to me, so I'm never getting rid of that one either. I mean, this is just cool to have. It was one of my dad's favorite bands, if not his favorite band of all time. So it's nice to have this to remember him by. You know, not my personal choice for a good track list of a best of, but I do like all those songs, even though a few of them are a little played out. But it's a keepsake. It's something to remember him by. So I'm gonna hold on to that forever. Now, I figured just talking about 5 records was not enough for me. And I started thinking about the whole Desert Island thing. Now, I know that's really well-worn territory. People have been talking about Desert Island, you know, selections ad nauseum into the ground. However, I was thinking about it from a little bit more of a utilitarian perspective. Like, if I was actually trapped on a desert island, and for some reason I had the clairvoyance to know that I was only going to have 5 albums, like perhaps I'd go on the trip, the 4-hour tour, or what, 3-hour tour? Isn't that the one from Gilligan's Island? I was going on the 3-hour tour with just knowing I was going to get trapped, but only had a tiny little iPod shuffle or something that could store 5 albums worth. These are the ones I would pick. I was kind of inspired slightly by, there was a Tech Dweeb round table where they were talking about what video game would you want to be trapped on a desert island with if you could only pick one. And a lot of people brought up, oh, well, it's got to be something long that I can play, or a entertaining puzzle game that I can play over and over again. So I started thinking in terms of, like, not just some of my favorite records, but what would make sense. And I don't know if, like, you know, compilations are a cheat in that way, but I don't really care. So 5 records. First of all, I feel like this would cover a lot of ground for me when I needed to listen to something fast and aggressive. This is the Peace War comp on our Radical Records. Came out sometime in the early 80s, mid 80s, but it's just an international feast of hardcore stuff. It's got everything from Neon Christ to Gizm to early DRI, like we talked about, Execute from Japan, The Offenders, Negazione, DOA. It's a solid, I don't know how long, probably hour and a half or something. It's packed to the gills with 80s hardcore. So that satisfies that need. I talked about this, my first 6 Black Sabbath records video. I'll leave a link for that. Black Sabbath Volume 4. That's an evergreen record that I'll never get sick of. It gave me pause for a moment. Like, do I really want to deal with being trapped on a desert island with changes so often, the song? And then I thought about it, and I'm like, that song's kind of gained new life for me. Maybe it's because of that soul cover of it or whatever, but I actually kind of enjoy Changes now. I think the first time I heard it was on We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll, and I always fast forwarded past it, but I think I'm good with that now. It's just got a nice varied track listing on it, Supernaut's nice and upbeat, but you got Snowblind on side B. I mean, it's volume 4. It's arguably one of the more popular Ozzy records under the Black Sabbath name, so we'll go with that. Now, need some hardcore. I picked the second Sheer Terror record, Ugly and Proud. My favorite Sheer Terror record is the first album, Just Can't Hate Enough, but I've listened to that so much, I want something that is a little bit longer and something that just a little bit more to sink my teeth into. When I discovered Sheer Terror, it was through a double CD retrospective called Bulldog Edition, which included the debut, Just Can't Hate Enough, Thanks for Nothing, which was largely a recording of most of this album, and then some demo stuff, I think some live stuff, some odds and ends. If I still own that, I'd cheat and just say I'm going to bring this, but I don't have that anymore on CD. So I'm going to go with the original version of Thanks for Nothing, Ugly and Proud. Thanks for Nothing was named as such because they had problems with their record company at the time, Maze Records or Magnetic Air. It's one of those weird fly-by-night record labels where going on Discogs and trying to sort out what they released and what name everything was under is very confusing. Apparently it was a Canadian label that ripped off Sheer Terror, probably their other bands too. They put out the first Biohazard LP. They reissued INRI by Sarcophago under a different name, but it was the same label. You might see Craze Records or Crazy Records. That's like the same thing as Maze Records. And then Magnetic Air was the imprint that the American version, I guess, that put out the Sheer Terror. I don't know. The point is, the band never really got their residuals. Paul Bearer, the vocalist, gives them a shout out on the re-recording on Thanks for Nothing. It says, "Hightail it back to Toronto, you Canadian scumbag." Sheer Terror's music is extremely innovative, hugely influential on everything that came past it in New York hardcore. Their first album's a combination of raw, negative 80s American hardcore stuff, clearly inspired by probably the Boston hardcore at the time, Negative Effects and the like, and probably Negative Approach and shit like that. And Discharge and Celtic Frost like crazy in the guitar department. Straight up Celtic Frost guitar tone. The tone is somewhat similar. It feels a little bit softened up. It's not like a direct rip, but it still kind of sounds kind of frosty. The riffs are a little bit more imaginative. They're still ferocious as hell, but there's a little bit more like 70s hard rock groove on certain songs, like Don't Hate Me 'Cause I'm Beautiful. And I mean, Paul's vocals, just this like strangulated hoarse shout. I feel like, I don't know, I might be talking out of pocket, but I feel like Kurt from Crowbar might be heavily inspired by Paul Bearer. It sounds like that. They have a similar approach. But Paul also sings. He can croon. He can do almost kind of a metal kind of thing. It sounds very real. It's just undoubtedly inspired probably by like 50s singers and stuff like that. So it's a cool varied style that they have. They have great lyrics. Some of the best like sort of poetic like kind of heartbreak lyrics, believe it or not, on all their stuff. So they're an all-time great for me. If I go to a desert island for whatever stupid reason, I'm bringing this with me. Then, you know what? we're going to be on an island. Why not some reggae? You know? Can't be listening to negative stuff and dark stuff all the time. Get this Trojan Reggae classics. I tend to like the 60s reggae stuff, early 70s reggae stuff. Not to say that I can't potentially get into some dub at some point. I like that stuff of what I've heard, but a lot of what I'm really all about is the classic Trojan stuff, all the stuff from the late 60s, the stuff that before reggae and ska went their separate ways, you know. And this has all the hits: Israelites by Desmond Decker, Monkey Man by the Maytals. You can get it if you really want by Desmond Decker. You know, all the hits. Not a super deep reggae head, but I'm gonna need this. I'm gonna need this if I'm on an island. Hooked up to my like coconut powered stereo or whatever. And then finally, I wanted to go with something that I was familiar with, but I don't have a very, very, very strong connection to, like something that I like, something that I've listened to a fair amount and that I know rips, but I want more time to like really, really absorb. And I've been familiar with this record since probably the late 90s or early 2000s, but I didn't really get it at the time. And then, you know, probably the last 10 or so years when I've been deep diving more into crust and anarcho-punk, you know, I've had a couple of spats of that. I've rediscovered this record and decided that it is brilliant. It is very like even keel, like same tempo all the way through, but it's steeped in so much atmosphere and it's excellent. So now hypothetically being on this island, I'll have a lot of time to spin this and really absorb it because I know it is brilliant and I do enjoy it. Antisect In Darkness, There Is No Choice. This is the reissue that came out on Rise Above, Lee Dorian's label. Probably currently at least one of my favorite labels. He really seems to curate stuff really well, ranging from like weird psychedelia to like reissuing this, which is an anarcho-punk, you know, gloomy crust kind of classic. UK band. This sounds brilliant, this reissue. It's really, really nice fold out. It folds out into a poster. Not gonna do that. After this, they went a little bit more grimy. They went a little bit heavier, a little crustier. There's only one 7-inch after this that's like studio recorded stuff. I wish there was an album's worth of it because it's very dark and very heavy and a bit more metallic. But this was the only proper full length they did. They have a lot of bootlegs and like live recordings and varying quality. But Antisect were a killer UK band from the early to mid 80s. Very, very, like I said, up-tempo, driving, hardcore punk kind of stuff, but there's just an aura of gloom over everything, just ranting kind of vocals, exposing, you know, the ills of society and capitalism, all that kind of stuff. You know, it's anarcho-punk. And it just sounds like dischargey kind of hardcore or punk rock, just like being played in a dungeon, essentially, is really the vibe that it gives. But I love this record. It's been a challenge. Like, I didn't like it at first. I heard a lot of people singing its praises back in the day. Repurchased it on CD, I don't know, like 6-7 years ago, around the beginning of the channel, I want to say, and was like, oh yeah, this rules. And this LP is a really nice way to listen to it. It sounds fantastic. And I just want to listen to it over and over again and not have any other alternative other than what I've shown, just to spend more time with it. So that's why I picked it. Not super intimately attached to it like the others, but I wanted something that was a little bit challenging and a little bit exciting to listen to. I was considering picking a brand new release, but nothing really came to mind of like, oh man, do I want to be stuck indefinitely and you know, hallucinating from dehydration and listening to something that I don't know. So I didn't pick that. I picked something semi, you know, not intimately familiar, but familiar. So there you go. Yeah, that is it for now. Couple of topics. Maybe you'd like to toss your hat in the ring when it comes to the 5 records you'd never sell thing. I think that's a fun topic. So who knows? Spread it around. I mean, if you want, also throw it in the comments. If you're not up to making a video, let me know. What are your 5 records you'd never sell and 5 desert island records? I'd love to hear about it. I would. Okay, I'm gonna go.